name is Peter Hartman. I'm the chair of the MIT Enterprise Forum here at Central Coast. And we basically are one out of 28 chapters in the world. And we put together these events, about 9 of them each year. And we're all a volunteer board. We've been here in the community about since 1986, actually. And we have a great board. We have about 32 board members that are volunteer and putting in a lot of hours, a lot of effort, as you can understand, in terms of putting events like this together. Bob Johnson, which I will introduce a little bit later, will talk a little bit about MIT Global and what we're doing as a big organization, some of that stuff. Before we get started, I wanted to give some thanks to the entire board of Enterprise Forum. You guys are doing a great job, and we've really been able to create a lot of buzz and a lot of momentum in the community, so I'm really grateful for that. So thank you so much, all of the boards. And I also want to give a special thanks to Ben Tucker, who tirelessly have worked, to be able to get this event off the ground and get all these chairs and mics and TVs and all that going on. Also Violet Kodo that you met out in the front. You've done a great job. And Kyle Ashby has done a great job and his team in terms of marketing, so thank you for that. I also want to say thanks to all our sponsors. We have had a loop going on as we network here of the sponsors that we have, and without them we wouldn't be able to function basically and put all these events together. So thank you very much for being a sponsor. Also, we give a special thanks to a special sponsor, which is Richard Sanford. He is the founder and owner of Almarosa Winery that graciously sponsor us for the wine. And he was just inducted into the Vintners Hall of Fame recently. And he's there with some very important people in the wine business, like Robert Mondavi, etc. So we're really grateful for his sponsorship, and I just want to say special thanks to him. Tonight we also have a special sponsor for the event. It's TriNet, and hopefully you've been able to talk to either Paul or to Oscar back there about TriNet. And TriNet is basically a company that deliver outsourcing of HR to allow entrepreneurs to focus on their core business. And that includes HR, workers' comp, payroll, benefits, hiring, firing. Basically, the biggest issues that most entrepreneurs deal with after financing is actually HR issues. Surprisingly enough, or maybe not so surprisingly, about 25% of their time of an entrepreneur is spent in HR and HR-related questions and stuff. So I hope they have a chance to meet Paul and Oscar, and we thank you for your sponsorship. They also have a raffle, I guess, tonight, so Paul can talk a little bit about that as well. I also want to plug some upcoming events before we get started here. We have some interesting events coming up. In April the 18th, we're going to do a piece around music and entrepreneurship. Music, tech, and entrepreneurship equals success. And we have some great speakers here. We're going to have Seymour Duncan is going to be a keynote, and we're putting together a great panel around that, so please mark that in your calendar. We're also going to have an event in Wednesday. It's link in the renewable energy, and it's basically clean energy storage. So we're putting together a program about that and a good panel, and that will be on June 20th of this year. I want to introduce Bob Johnson. He is on our board. He's a board emeritus, and that means that he's been on the board for a long time. He's also a board member of many boards in town and very active in the community. He's also the managing partner of Founders Capital, which is a local VC firm. So without further ado, Bob.
Thanks, Peter. As Peter said, I'm Bob Johnson, been on the board a while. Some of you have not been to one of our events in the past, so I just wanted to give you a couple minutes of background. We've been doing this in Santa Barbara for 26 years. We are one of 28 chapters in the world, as Peter said. Santa Barbara is by far the smallest city that has a chapter, which is a real tribute and recognition of the vitality of our innovation and entrepreneurship here, and we're quite proud of that. A lot of people ask me, why does MIT do this? And there's really a fairly simple answer. For 151 years now, MIT has had a mission of bringing science and technology into practical use for the benefit of mankind. And that culture results in starting lots of companies. The 120,000 living MIT alums, they've started 26,000 companies which are still independent. They employ almost 3.5 million people, and their revenues combined are over $2 trillion, which if you looked at it as a country would be the 11th largest economy in the world. So entrepreneurship and innovation is something we believe in and we support. We support it anywhere we find it, and it really makes no difference at all where you went to school. Another development in the last year, last June, the Enterprise Forum joined forces with Technology Review, which some of you may recognize as MIT's magazine on innovation and technology. This new association is going to provide us with a much broader platform from which to work, many more interesting programs, and we'll also be putting the videos of programs that are done by the chapters all over the world up in the cloud so that you'll be able to look at them at your convenience when you want. So this is going to be a very nice coming online. One last thing, I'm very pleased to be able to say, as I did last month, that the Central Coast MIT Enterprise Forum will receive the Excellence in Service Award from South Coast Business and Technology Awards Association this year.
Okay. So the big picture, why are there incubators and why are they getting popular right now? And you know, ultimately, what we're trying to do and what the government's trying to do is to drive economic growth. And how do you do that? You do that with inventions and innovation. The problems that they're running into is the fact that there's not the environment in place to support the entrepreneurs getting these inventions to the marketplace. And the second problem is putting the inventions together with the entrepreneurs. So from that came this big wave now towards big business incubation. And the goal is really to incubate companies and get them out there as freestanding and viable entities. And the outcome is to commercialize technology, which is great, create jobs, and strengthen the local community around the incubator. So what does an incubator offer to an entrepreneur? And they can offer workspace, flexible leases, flexible space, business assistance. Some of them offer management guidance, some offer technical support, some offer consulting, facility-based services. There's equipment, you can share copiers, you can have your conference rooms and so forth. But beyond that, they offer more of a soft skills, intangible in the collaboration. Because suddenly you're in with a bunch of like minds and you can collaborate, you can get ideas, you can get help. Access to capital. Some, as you'll find today, there's some that give you direct access to capital. In fact, they might even give you capital when you walk in the door. There's others that it's indirect. Investors tend to like incubators, and we've got an investor that'll speak to that later. There's a screening process coming into the incubator. The chances of success is greater when they're in an incubator. A lot of incubators have a mentor network. So once you're in the incubator, then you've got access to mentors that can also help you along. Some offer training and classes, and as I mentioned, sometimes they make an investment themselves. So this is kind of what it looks like to an incubator model. You know, they recruit companies to come in, they enter, they get support, and they grow. Hopefully very few of them stagnate. The ones that stagnate then have to leave, but they grow and then they graduate, and they move on, and then they're viable and someone else comes in the door. So who sponsors these incubators? It's changing. The interesting thing about the whole landscape right now is it's changing momentarily. But right now, only 4% are for-profit entities. The biggest piece, 31%, is economic development organizations. Government entities have 21%. Universities, academic institutions, 20%. But again, it's changing daily. So the one thing I found as I went to LA and we did some more research on this is that there's not one size fits all at all. I did not see the same incubator model twice, okay? There's incubators, and there's all different flavors of incubators, and then there's accelerators. So what's the difference? An incubator, and again, it's really a gray area, it's a gradient, so it's not cut and dry. But incubators, companies come in, they may or may not get any funding. They can stay for often as long as they want. There's different levels of support. An accelerator is more, it's a screening process. You get accepted into it. You get some funding often as you walk in the door, but it's a short period and then you're out. So it's this accelerate and launch. So the period that you're in there might only be 4 months. And often the accelerators take equity for that. And then there's co-work spaces, and they're popping up all over too, where it's almost like the executive rental spaces, but it's for entrepreneurs and for startups. But there's not the formal support in place. So does it work? I did a little bit of research, and according to the Small Business Administration, 20% of new businesses fail within 5 years. Why? They don't have money and they don't have the management skills. So that's why the accelerator and even the incubator that gives access to network of capital is now filling that role. And the Economic Development Administration showed that 87% of the incubator graduates, companies that graduated out of incubators, are still viable and remain in business after 5 years. So that's pretty good news. What do the numbers say? The numbers support the premise that incubators create jobs, they revitalize neighborhoods, they commercialize new technologies. In 2005 alone, North America incubators had 27,000 startup companies that they graduated, which translated into full-time employment of over 100,000 workers and an annual revenue into the economy of greater than $17 billion. So with that, I'm going to bring our speakers up, and we're going to move on to the rest of the program. We're going to start out with, from an entrepreneur perspective, we've got Klaus Schausser, and he's the founder and chief strategist of Appfolio, and he was also the founder of Expert City, which turned into Citrix Online. And Klaus has experience, which he'll tell you, in several incubators. He's been in a couple. And then following that, we have Steve Reich, which I'll introduce more fully when he comes on board. He's going to talk from an investor perspective. Michael Holliday, who is the architect and the brains and thought behind this. And then we have Sam Tellis, who is the managing director of Launchpad. So I'll give you more details on them when we get going. But for now, we're going to start with Klaus.
So I'm Klaus Schausser, and it's really exciting because both of the startups that I was involved in, both Expert City as well as Appfolio, were in incubators. Actually, we're in 3 different incubators, and so I want to kind of share my experience with that and just tell you a little bit why I think they're extremely valuable. And in terms of a little bit more background, I was a professor in computer science at UC Santa Barbara and founded Expert City with 2 of my PhD students, and then that did GoToMyPC, GoToMeeting, got sold to Citrix, and now I'm doing a new company called Appfolio. So let's start a little bit with kind of the joke part of it. This one, when I started Expert City, I really loved because it's like, I can do something that's just in 7 steps, how to form your very own Silicon Valley startup, in 7 easy steps. So that I added actually, being computer scientist, step 0. We always like to count from 0, right? Step 0, join an incubator, and this was actually the Pacific Technology Center out at Goleta. There was the 3 of us, my 2 co-founders, Malte and Bernd, 2 of my PhD students, and myself, standing right in front of there was Expert City. Step number 1, you go to Menlo Park, you find a tree. Step number 2, you shake the tree, a venture capitalist will fall out. Step number 3, before the venture capitalist regains his wits, you recite the following incantation. Internet, electronic commerce, distributed enterprise-enabled applications, Java. Actually, that won't work today, right? Will it? What do you have to say today? Oh, cloud, you guys are smart. What else? Social, oof, even smarter. What else? HTML5, clean tech, mobile. And for Java? Ruby. Who said that? Very good, yes. Okay, so yeah, there you go. Before the venture capitalist regains its wits, you recite the following incantation: social, mobile, local, nano, MEMS, internet video, SaaS, Web 2.0, Ruby. Step number 4, the venture capitalists will give you $4 million. You definitely don't want to miss the step, Step number 5, in 18 months you go public. Step number 6, after you receive your check, you go back to Menlo Park, you find a tree, you climb it, and you wait. I wish it would be that easy. I can tell you from experience, is not like that at all. And so what I just want to do is kind of share a little bit of the hard lessons learned, go a little bit about, tell you a little bit more of, kind of from my perspective, business incubators, accelerators, and co-work spaces, why they are, the history a little bit, also in Santa Barbara here, and some of the benefits, and then tell you a little bit of my experience in Expert City with those, as well as in Upfolio with those, and some of the lessons learned with that. So let's start with business incubators, accelerators. Now, first one, what are they? So Susan already talked a little bit about that. There's different things. At the bottom, a lot of them have shared facilities. These kind of the co-working space, and then you've got on top of that folks that provide other services like incubators, and then there's the accelerators, and then the top one, which I kind of call the spin-outs. So let's look at them in a little bit more detail. So the co-working workspace, essentially what you do there is you get flexible office space. You get internet access, you get conference rooms, you get the receptionist, you get physical security and a guard walking along, you get also a whole bunch of network activities like these here, And I think that's a great way to get started, because you can kind of network with a lot of other people and you really learn from the context. So the Pacific Technology Center that we were is pretty much like that. I think it was great. It was set up in, I think it was in 97 probably, or 98. Bill, you would know, right? When did you move in, huh? Around that, 96, okay. And it's a great service that Michael Dittmore kind of set it up together with Jeff Bermand, and then we did the property management, as well as Mel Beckman actually put the internet in. And I think back then, just having internet was a big deal. It's like most offices just didn't have it. And you could just go plop down $300 and you get an office, It was supposed to be only for one person, but hey, if you're a startup, you can fit 2 in there, And so we got 2 offices and we're able to fit 3 people in. So that was pretty good for us, and that was $600 a month, yeah. The next level, if you look at that, it's a little bit more in terms of other services. So there's like business basics that you learn there. Maybe there's some marketing assistance. Maybe there's accounting and finance management. They can help you with that. Maybe there's some formal training, like presentation training. There might be some loans and maybe even some funding that comes along with that. Advisory board, help with recruiting, because as you heard, there's a lot of time that companies spend on that. And then maybe even compliance if you go after different vertical markets. And so the great model is the incubator that was downtown here in Santa Barbara. The one on 402 East Gutierrez Street, and that's the Santa Barbara Business and Technology Center. Dennis Kagan kind of helped get that launched, and there's a whole bunch of other people involved in that too. And some of the companies, they actually fund it, and they got some financing. So that's kind of level number 2. The accelerators, I call it level number 3, although, as Susan pointed out, maybe it's a short term, Really, this is like you get thrown into the water. There's really intensive, sink or swim type of stuff, intensive training, lots of mentors, maybe there's even executives come along. Funding is always part of that, so it's like if you get approved, and it's a very strict type of income. A great idea of that one is kind of the Y Combinator. How many people here have heard of the Y Combinator? Yeah. Okay, a lot of them, So I think they made that really popular and really have kind of classes, and there are 25 startups that all go through the classes together, So then spin-outs, I kind of put that at the top of the pinnacle just because they add so much more services. And this is more, very often these spin-outs generate the ideas themselves. And they generate the intellectual property, like patents or maybe even the code, and then help transform that into companies. A great example of that is Idea Lab down in Pasadena. Bill Gross there has been doing that for a long, long time, and he's a guy that has just more ideas than he could ever implement in his whole lifetime. Here's a list of a whole bunch of ideas. Not all of them are actually his. Some of this, they just invested in. But a lot of those. He's the guy that originally did GoTo, and which is Overture, which is essentially paid search model. Before Google came up with that, the pay for click, he actually had that already invented. And it was pretty successful. Sold to Yahoo for billions of dollars. There's some companies on there like Commission Junction. That's a Santa Barbara one. Actually, 2 of my students kind of started that. Per Pedersen and Roger Kinstrud, and hooked up with LexisNexis, and they kind of. Now for that, Idea Lab only provided funding and not the actual idea, So those are kind of like a big overview. And so a little bit of history, turns out that Susan and I come up with similar statistics, But here's one that she didn't have. It's like, to me, it was like mind-blowing. The first incubator here in the US was formed in 1959 in New York. And you think, wow, that's amazing. Back then already, well, there was already startups back then. And then there were 12 incubators in 1980, and then there's 1,400 incubators in 2006. And lately there's been this explosion. Everybody seems to be talking about it. If you followed the news, LA, there's like in the last 6 months, there's at least 5 or 6 new, very strong incubators / accelerators down there. And maybe we'll get to hear a little bit more about those later on, And then I found the same statistic that Susan did. To me, it's just amazing that you have, incubators really help. 27,000 companies, hundreds of thousands of employees, as well as, billions, $17 billion in terms of revenue, what they're generating. So how does it look here in Santa Barbara? Let's look at that a little bit. So here's a little bit map of Santa Barbara, and you see kind of Goleta on one side and kind of Santa Barbara on the other side. So let's just kind of zoom in on kind of like a little bit. So this Pacific Technology Center is out in Goleta. It's kind of where Patterson Hollister is at the intersection behind the hospital, And there's a whole bunch of companies that came out of it that are actually did quite well. In eFax, Indigo, Bill Parrish is sitting over there. He helped found that. FastClick was there. eFax was sold to J2, Indigo was sold to Fleur, FastClick was sold to ValueClick, Expert City, was ultimately sold to Citrix, and there's even companies today in that building that are actually, there's a whole bunch, AutoVitals is one of them, Jim Semming, the one that's doing the clicking here for me, he does a lot of market validation, product development validation. He has his office right next to where my 2 offices were there, so it's in the same wing. Good karma, there you go. There's a whole bunch of successful folks in that wing, including Scott Stefan, where's he? Over there. Yeah, he's sitting right across from my old office, So that's a good one. The next one is the Gutierrez Santa Barbara Technology and Business Center that I mentioned. There's a whole bunch of companies that were in there, including Appfolio, RightScale, Logic Monitor, and the list is obviously much, much longer if you go even further back in time, Ants.com and stuff like that. Here's another interesting one. Maybe not that many have heard of it, but ELC was a little kind of consulting shop, but actually spun out a whole bunch of companies, including RightCard and Right Signature. It's actually also one of my students, Jonathan Siegel, that kind of started that out of computer science. And So I would call this, it's more like kind of a spin out. It's like, or consulting, they were kind of involved and created the technology and helped spin it out. Yeah. Another one is Estalea. These were the founders also that I mentioned before from Commission Junction, Per and Roger. And they actually had 5 companies kind of spin out of that, you know. It's pretty amazing. Impact Radios, LeadPoint, Savings.com, TerraMatrix, and Calls Direct. Not all of them are located now here in Santa Barbara. The technology development in most cases still is. At least 2 of those companies are down in LA, you know, just because that's where the executives that they found to run the companies ultimately ended up being, you know. But 3 of them are still here in Santa Barbara. And it's essentially, they start in their own space and then come up with these ideas and kind of spin these out, you know. Another similar one, this is Brad Payton, LaunchPoint. You know, he's a professor at UCSB. He's kind of more mechanical and engineering type of staff. And he has lots of great ideas. And it sits in Goleta and kind of in Old Town Goleta. And it's essentially a great engineering lab, lots of great people, and essentially creates this intellectual property and then kind of spins it out into kind of companies, you know. And the latest one is it's on Castilian and also in Goleta. You know, it's the Castilian Business and Research and Technology Center, and that's now where we moved to after we ran out of space at the downtown incubator because we were just growing too much. And so Smart Receipt, Sientra, Folio are all in this building, including several other ones, you know. So to me, it's like very amazing that such a small city like Santa Barbara, you know, Santa Barbara, Goleta, you know, can already have such an ecosystem of incubators. You know, obviously the proximity to UCSB helps, and from my own experience, you know, having these incubators actually, you know, if you're an academic, the truth is that you don't know nothing about running a business. 0, right? And so you have really a lot of hard lessons that you need to learn, and interacting with the business world really helps you tremendously in that process. So what are some of the benefits? You know, we've already heard about that. You know, starts with just the internet access in the actual office and then all the shared services that go along with it. But from my perspective, the biggest benefit as a startup that you get is really, you know, the flexibility and time to market. You know, when you, and Jeff Bezos, you know, he's kind of the guy that's the CEO of Amazon, you know, and Amazon, as you know, that's cloud computing, AWS, EC2, S3 type of stuff. Now, he always says, we do all of the heavy lifting, all the crap, so that you don't have to do it. Yeah? To me, incubators are the same thing. You know, I don't really want to worry about the desks and the internet connectivity and having to go to different providers and get a phone line and a secretary and a copy machine and a conference room and everything else that you really need to get a company off the ground. That's really, so what you can do is you can just take your laptop, plop it in there and say, hey, I'm coding. You know, that's all you need. And, oh, you got some funding? Wonderful, let's hire 4 more coders. You put them in, you know. You got some little more funding and start selling? Oh, let's hire some Salesforce. You put those in. And really what you get is you get this tremendous flexibility, agility, and scalability that's kind of built into it. And to me, this time to market is just so much of an essence. It's like, how quickly can you really be selling to customers, developing the product, without really having to worry about all of the stuff that's not core to your business. And definitely all facilities usually is not core to your business. And then you get the learning that we talked about, the access to mentor. Maybe there's some funding involved with it, depending on what it is, you know. And here's the increased success rate, you know, where Susan dug out the same statistic. You know, 87% succeed in incubators versus in the other world, you know, long term, it's only 44%, you know, according to the Small Business Administration. To me, that is like a huge difference. That is so amazing. It shows you that that context actually makes you more successful. It definitely was the case for me. So coming up with an analogy with cloud computing, I think, you know, it just gives you the same flexibility as cloud computing. And so Bloomberg Business Week just had, you know, this little funny chart, you know, so which I thought I'll just guide you through, you know. So you want to start a company. Here's where you start, you know. If it is 1999, you know, step number 1 that you do is you move to Silicon Valley. Step number 2 is you visit the venture capitalists. You know, then you order all the equipment. Then, you house the expensive hardware in data centers with raised floors and cooling equipment, and those are the web servers, the file servers, the routers, the firewall, the mail servers, the switches. Then you hire all the army of sysadmins, Then you obviously buy designer office furnishing, ping pong table, all the other stuff to keep your people happy, Obviously, after you've done that, you need to beg for more funding. If you made that, then you spend lavishly on marketing and plot your IPO, and finally, at that point, you can say, I'm going to launch. So that was 1999, and lots of companies did that. We at Expert City, even there for servers, we spent millions of dollars in servers. What would you do today? Well, this is where the power of the cloud comes in, So let's start again. Let's say it's now 2011. I guess now it's 2012, but when this was published, it was 2011. You swipe your credit card, you get access to the power of the cloud, and you launch. So I think really what it is if you look at the benefits, it's like the same advantages that the cloud gives to you as in a kind of an IT and kind of a software business. It's Incubator gives you the same advantage. It's the same flexibility. It's the same agility, time to market scalability. It's like, I don't have to worry about all that infrastructure. Other people are. Let me focus on where I add the most value, which is maybe writing that piece of code that sits on top of Amazon EC2, and I use RightScale on Amazon EC2 and all the other stuff to really make my life very simple so that I don't have to manage the servers. They auto-manage themselves. And it's a thin layer. And to me, that's very exciting because it means that that's where you put your intellectual property. That's how you can really get going. So hopefully this was kind of a good overview from my perspective in terms of also Santa Barbara and kind of the incubators that we see here. And as Susan mentioned, there's no really clear-cut definition. They're all different, but you see a lot of these commonalities here. And to me, again, as I said, it's exciting that there are so many of those here in town. So now let me just share a little bit, kind of from my experience with startup number one, Expert City, and just want to just guide you through a little bit of the evolution that we went through. It is actually very gut-wrenching turns that we did. We raised $34 million in 1999 to implement, before we had any revenue, to implement this great idea. Let's build Expert City, the city full of experts, the eBay for services. It's a phenomenal idea. Had just one problem: people weren't willing to pay for technical support. But fortunately for us, is our screen share technology that really allowed, and we built an expert network of 1,000 people, 500 of those in India, and those experts could connect to your PC and really help you as if they're sitting right next to you. Fortunately, companies like Gateway, Intuit, and Microsoft were really interested in that, so they came back and wanted to really use it for their expert, but not for our experts, And also, fortunately, I had decided I'm not the CEO, let other people run the shop, so hired Andreas von Blottness, who used to be CEO of AOL Europe and really understood the internet business, as well as really this was his fourth startup that he was involved in, as well as John Greathouse, who was our CFO. They had a lot more business smart. And they said, well, this other model isn't working. But you can see, at that point, we started selling desktop streaming, which essentially just gives the support organization access to their desktops of their customers. And really what it does, the value purpose is pretty simple. You cut the call time in half. You save a lot of your own people time. Now, obviously, since we got all the funding and the $34 million for Expert City, that's really what we put at the top. And the desktop streaming that really made all the money is at the bottom of this page. So this was in 2001. The other was 2000. And then, a couple of years later, you see Expert City. There's no Expert City anymore. There's just desktop streaming and Go to My PC. So we said, hey, if we were going to do that, we might just do Go to My PC. It's really what I originally wanted. I want to access all of my computers. Let's try those, But we were smarter. We did market validation for those. We really tested where there's actually an appetite, where the people were willing to pay for it. It turned out the answer is yes. And so that's why we launched that product. And then, there's different versions of Go to My PC. Then Citrix bought us, and Expert City became Citrix Online because it has all these online software as a service subscription model. And then we launched also GoToMeeting, and all these products today are doing phenomenally well. Citrix Online has over 1,000 people, and they're doing, probably something like $500 million of revenue. Those numbers are public. And it's just very amazing, the business that has grown there. And I'm so proud of all the people there. It's just truly, truly, truly amazing. And, the company is still located here in Santa Barbara. I really love that part of it, you know. So now what I want to do is kind of share a couple of pictures. This is one picture, you know, you see Expert City, we had our little logo on the Pacific Technology Center, and there's a whole bunch of people sitting out there. You know, John Greathouse, he's now a venture partner at Rincon Ventures is there, and Andreas von Blattnitz, and you know, my two co-founders, they're actually still at Citrix Online, and a whole bunch of other folks there, including Brian Donahue, who's our CEO now at Appfolio. Yeah. So here's what we had. We had individual offices in that, and here we're actually mapping out the flow for Expert City. You know, Heidi, this was, you know, kind of the flow specialist, you know, website flows. And here we're celebrating with, what is it, Chinese food, you know, the launch of Go to My PC, you know. So, but it was really kind of individual office, but we also had access to conference room, everything else, you know. So these are some of the pictures that I was able to kind of dig out, you know. So what are some of the lessons learned? You know, so the first one is, you know, from my perspective, starting in incubator really helps. Just you get all that exposures, you know, with all of the other folks in there. And I still remember having all these conversations with EFAX and even with the Indigo people and stuff like that, you know. The next thing is that most startups don't end up as what they started up, you know. So really the corollary of that, you better be able to hire the right flexible team that can shift and pivot, because that's a fact of life. Or even better, try to do market validation up front, which we didn't do, you know. So we burned through $10 million. That's why I always like to call, that's our $10 million mistake that we made. Except, you know, if you raise 34, you do the simple math, 34 minus 10 is 24. Well, 24 is still sufficient to get the plan B going, you know. And then, you know, always learn from others, you know, customers, mentors, books. I just love reading. I love all of that. I think that's just very important, you know. So really, now with startup number 2, obviously we're a little bit smarter. So Appfolio, you know, the vision of Appfolio is, you know, very similar to the other one is like software as a service, the future. But really what we're focusing on there is complete, easy to use business process management solutions for different vertical markets. You know, think of it like what you want to do is you want to have web-based software that you can run your complete business on, accounting and all of other functions. Really, you're creating a paperless office. And so we did a lot of market validation up front before we decided which vertical to go after, and identified that property management, legal is 2 very promising opportunities. We decided property management is the one to go with, you know. And it's created something that, you know, property managers can run their complete property management business online, you know, run all these reports, even use it from an iPhone. You know, if a tenant calls up, they can issue maintenance tickets. You know, tenants can apply online. You can do background screen on tenants online. They can pay their rent online, and it's just has been really, really great for us, you know. So, and that one we started at the Gutierrez, you know, Santa Barbara Business and Technology Center, you know, I have a couple more photos of that one. It's essentially, you know, those of you that have been there, it's kind of these funky workspaces that were there. You know, it was a huge hall, but it was just really neat space, you know, because they were essentially individual workspaces. We kind of had to, you know, restructure it a little bit and put our own stuff in there. And you know, you had conference room for larger meetings. You had even more conference room for even larger meetings, and then you had real large conference room for company meetings. So this was our company back then, everybody there. And at that point, we were kind of running out of space. You see me holding actually a little speakerphone up there, so we actually had a couple of people work remote, you know? So it's like a virtual company in that sense, you know? Here's the folks that are kind of on the other side of that speakerphone, you know? They're like in their home, you know, with a little dock, you know? So that's the advantage of, you know, working from home, yeah? They're, you know, the incubator was kind of in the living room, you know? And obviously, you know, you've got all these technologies now, you know, including GoToMyPC and GoToMeeting to be able to do remote work. You know, you've got Skype. It's just phenomenal how you can actually communicate and collaborate with distributed teams, yeah. And then, you know, Brian Donahue joined as a CEO, and then we started to really grow. Actually, you know, all he got was a laptop and monitor, you know, I guess, and he brought his Diet Pepsi himself, you know. But everything else that you see there, you know, all the furniture was there, you know, all the trash cans, everything else, you know, somebody else worries about, you know, emptying the trash, you know. So it's just so awesome. And that worked great until, you know, Sabine and Berman said, you know, says, oh, well, unfortunately, we're out of space in this, and you're growing too fast, but we're opening up this new incubator. It's in Goleta. And we said, oh, can't we stay here? No, you're growing too fast. It's like, okay, we'll move to Goleta, So we moved to Goleta. So this is the Castilian Research and Technology Center, and on 55 Castilian. Well, the first thing we do is the space is slightly different. We have just wide open space. So it's a little bit different, Great. So we say, hey, let's play badminton, and had a real tournament for a day of who was the actual ultimate winner, And then, next step, and this is where you see, this is already the crud, Oh, geez, got all these chairs, we had to assemble all those chairs, Actually, then we had IKEA send us these desks and these little cabinets, and we had everybody assemble these desks and these cabinets, Well, there's like 3 days of lost productivity, right? Number 1, badminton, day number 1. Day number 2, assembling the chairs. Day number 3, assembling all of those desks, So we could have saved that amount of time. Fortunately, we were at that point already far along that we could afford 3 days of lost productivity, But the space was a little bit nicer. As you can see, it was open-ended, and really, we do a lot of pair programming, agile software development, and you see these people doing a stand-up, and there's a burn-down chart and all this other stuff. So it really worked well for our development style, And then the other nice thing about all being the same place, here somebody is demoing something. You can see those two, they just paired on something and came up with some great solution. And look at all the other guys coming in. Albert, our sales guy, he's like, oh, he's like, this is so cool, And you see John, my co-founder and CTO, skeptically looking over there. What are my guys doing into the sales? They get distracted by sales, because we have to keep Albert in check so that he doesn't distract all the engineers, But I guess I actually sit all the way on the left. It's hard to see, I'm just very grumpy. Get back to work, guys, So, and you see all these posters on the wall and stuff like that, and all the plants. We actually had a plant growing competition who could grow the fastest, Ultimately, the secret to growing plants the fastest is put a bright light at the bottom, but that's I thought I was cheating, but it worked, So, and then, other nice things, you can just sit together and kind of demo stuff, It's like me demoing, I guess this was an iPhone that just came out, and how our software worked on an iPhone, how amazing that is, and all the engineers find that amazing, And then obviously you have summer interns, and what do summer interns do? They play Guitar Hero. So that's maybe the bad part of it, as you see people back there pairing and trying to get some work done while the summer interns play Guitar Hero, right? Loud music, but hey, that's part of the fun, So what are the lessons learned from that, I think first one is obviously second starter was easier. You get a little bit smarter, I learned, let's do market validation up front. That was a huge lesson, And I think because we did market validation, we actually managed to raise also $30 million of VC funding, because we proved that, yes, software as a service will happen, customers are willing to pay this, and hey, there's a real opportunity out there. The next one is, hey, the same lesson as in startup number 1, starting an incubator is a great idea. Well, maybe even starting in 2 incubators, even better idea, sequentially, we actually had several VC meetings in all these conference rooms, so you actually look big, even though there's like just 3 guys, It looks like you're a real company, Time to market, lots of flexibility, the agility, scalability to talk about. I think, the amount of time that you save on all that infrastructure is just really, really large, And then, the last one is clearly always learn from others, customers, mentors, books, type of stuff. And that's, I think, why you guys are here too. I think you're doing all the right stuff to attend MIT forums and other events like this, the Catalyst events. Those are like really great events that you can learn from a lot without really having to go through the lessons yourself. Yeah. Good, so that's kind of my overview. So let me just end with a little summary here, So if you want to make your own idea successful, well, my first biggest advice, do the market validation, Identify really what it boils down to, identify a problem worth solving, something that customers are willing to pay you for, It sounds pretty simple, but a lot of companies, they get so enamored in the technology, do something, and then ship a product, and then realize nobody really wants to buy it. Or maybe they would love the product, but they don't really want to pay for it. That problem is just as good, or just as bad, yeah? So Frank Robinson, he's a local guy. He's now come up with this market validation process, and it's very simple in essence, Most people say, great, I've got an idea. Let me design something. Let me build something. Let me sell something. turn it upside down. First, sell. After you've sold enough of those things, and obviously it better be always more or less the same, not one-off, then you design it, then you build it, and then you sell a lot more, and you will be so much more successful. There's a guy called Stephen Blank, and that's actually me just last week getting together with him. He wrote before a book called The 4 Steps to Epiphany, but he just came out with his new book called The Startup Owner's Manual, the step-by-step guide for building a great company, and that's essentially the same process. He calls it customer development, and that's just an awesome way to kind of get started. So I talked to Frank, or another resource, talk to Jim here, Jim Zemek. I think they can all kind of help you with that process. Or read Steve Blank's book. The next one is to hire the right flexible team. As I said, you're probably going to end up with something completely different, so you might have to pivot. And then my next one, learn from others. You already heard that. So leverage the cloud. Make your things easy, but also maybe join the incubator, or if you're too timid of doing your own launch startup, hey, how about joining a really great company? Yeah. So I'll leave you with this quote that I really like, from Albert Einstein. Vision without execution is hallucination. So, thanks.
Thanks, Klaus. So next we have Steve Reich, and Steve is a venture capitalist with Granite Creek Ventures, and also was an investor in a startup that started an incubator down in LA called Leisure Life, and then he went in as an operating role in Leisure Life. So he's going to speak from several hats, but also mainly the investor hat. So thank you, Steve.
Well, first let me correct one little thing. It's a bit of an overstatement to call me a venture capitalist. More like an angel investor would be more appropriate. I don't quite have enough money to climb Klaus's tree yet, but we're doing this at a little different scale. And I've also been involved in the startup of 3 or 4 different companies, one of which we took public, one of which we sold to a large corporate. So I've had a lot of good fortune, and it gives me a little perspective as an investor on what it takes for some of these companies to succeed, and hopefully a little perspective on how investors can work with incubators and with accelerators, because I think there's a huge opportunity there that is really worth tapping into, and it's one of those nice things that truly is a win-win. It's certainly an opportunity for the investors to make some money. It's also a chance for them to really assist, mentor, and accelerate, if you'll let me borrow the term, some of these small companies. And so if we go forward, I've talked a little bit about, I'll talk a little bit about our experience, Pasadena Angels, that is, with an incubator that is very close to us, works closely with us. And as an aside, been a Pasadena Angel since 2002, so I've seen a little bit of this. I've also been doing a little bit of mentoring lately with Start Engine Accelerator, so maybe I can give a little on-the-ground perspective, if you will, of the differences between the two, and some of the early results I've seen at Start Engine, which are pretty exciting, and I think speak to the more global accelerator model. I think there's some real opportunity there as well. And then just close up with a few summaries. So if we can go forward. My personal experience is largely around LA County's Business Technology Center. It is sponsored by LA County. It's located in an enterprise zone. It's on the order of 40,000 square feet, very large facility. And all of the things Klaus was saying absolutely echo and resonate with me. Did a lot of work with LeisureLink in this incubator, and all of the same things happen to us. Get a small office first, cram too many people in it. They very graciously let us expand from there. And then, oops, time for one of those pivots. We need to contract and give up a few hundred square feet. Also not a problem. So not only, to Klaus's point, do they provide all this infrastructure, but there is a level of flexibility there, at least at BTC, that you would never see from a commercial landlord. You walk into their office one day and say, yeah, I know we've got 3,000 square feet today, but I really need 1,800 tomorrow. That's okay, right? No, never mind that lease I signed. So it's a very, very different experience in terms of starting up a company versus going out and having to lease up space. So if we go forward. I want to talk a little about just the relationship between the Pasadena Angels and the BTC, because it's very nuts and bolts practical. I mean, nuts and bolts practical to the point where the Pasadena Angels actually have an administrative office in the BTC. We use it for a lot of our meetings. And so we're practicing what we preach, so to speak. We spend a great deal of time there. Go forward. The other thing we do that I think is enormously valuable that gets overlooked sometimes is we assist each other in marketing. And there are lots of things that go on in the broader Southern California, like this event, that one or the other side might not know about, and we have a tendency to invite one another. One of the people from the BTC is teaching a class for engineering students at Cal State LA, and he brought in a few of us last week to judge the students' pitches. And it was a great experience. I'd never even been on the campus at Cal State LA. I would have had no idea that there were entrepreneurial activities going on there. And we met some absolutely brilliant master's candidates in the engineering department that had some wonderful ideas and some things that were really very, very atypical. So we had a lot of fun with that experience, and that goes on. And part of what drives this is consistent interaction. You always hear we're talking about the incubator environment, how great it is to be stimulated by the other companies, all of which is true. And that's also true about the relationship with the investors. A couple of the key people from LA County are associate members at the Pasadena Angels, and they attend every meeting. And I can't tell you how often one of them sort of taps one of us on the elbow and said, a company wandered in the other day, and you really need to take a look at. And it's very valuable. For those of you who are investors, deal flow is everything, and it just expands the ecosystem into which you can look and work. And the last thing is just to speak a little about how it's helped the funded companies. And I think Klaus has done such a good job. I don't want to even spend too much time on that, but it has been wonderful for us as investors to have an easy place to put companies, to have them not lose all that productivity, arguing over the real estate, arguing over the internet costs or the phone costs or what have you. And I have, like I say, a very direct experience with this because I was spending the better part of a year with one of these companies getting it off the ground. So it's been enormously helpful in a very practical sense. And I wanted to pull that out because as you see all the press that's going on around the incubators and accelerators, with all the hype and all of them starting up at this point, it gets a little esoteric and it gets a little strategic. But yet what you're hearing from Klaus as a founder is it's all the practical nuts and bolts things that create the value, particularly in the earliest days. Go forward. So from here, I'd like to talk a little bit about Start Engine, one of the new accelerators in LA. And I'm on their mentor roster. I'm just very informally involved with them at this point. It was started by Howard Marks of Activision fame, and they have a really interesting model. They're bringing in 10 companies per quarter. They are providing them with accounting support, legal support, all those typical things. Also some dedicated mentoring. And when they say mentoring, this is not taking a phone call once in a while. This is spending at least a day a week with the company. It's a very big commitment of time. It's an interesting model. And the other thing you see up there is they take 10% of your company for $20,000, which as an angel investor made my eyes pop. I would love to be able to get 10% of a company for $20,000. And I frankly had my doubts about that. Was a little concerned that how do I think about this? Are they taking advantage of the company? Is this a value add? What is the situation? So I had occasion to do some work with one of their companies, and it's called Pro Noise, and they are focused on promoting indie bands using a battle of the bands metaphor. We probably see them launch in the next few weeks. Very exciting company doing some pretty interesting things. And so I spent time with the founder, and I thought rather than giving my impressions, I'm going to try to give you his impressions as best I can. And love their artwork. I mean, seeing Edison with headphones on seemed really appropriate for an MIT crowd for some reason, so I thought I would include that. But if you go forward, I started as best I could asking leading questions of the founder and saying, how's this working for you? Trying to ask these things in a non-prejudicial way. It came out right away that he felt like he was getting enormous value, enormous support. And I think it's particularly critical because this is someone who's 24 years old. He's read a lot and studied a lot about launching a company. He's never, ever done it before. So that was interesting to me that he felt like the support network was extremely important to him. The next point was that the accelerator is giving him genuine acceleration. Because he needed to get contacts in the music business, he asked Howard to assist him with that, and not surprisingly, someone with that degree of wealth and fame and success found it pretty easy to get people to take the founder's calls. And it has resulted directly in some assistance with the launch in a particular venue that they would have never gotten before. It's one of the major music clubs in LA, and there's no way they would have done anything with him, and that's now his first customer. And love that, have a sales background. You don't very often get to start at the top of a market. You generally have to start with little companies and work your way out. So that was particularly impressive to me. The next comment he made, I quizzed him about the mentoring, because mentoring means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I see it in myself as I'm mentoring small companies. Sometimes it's a 5-minute phone call while I'm driving to Santa Barbara because I'm too harassed to give any more than that. And other days it's camping out on site for a couple of days, getting deeply involved, working on parts of the company. And as I drilled into it and started asking Chase, the founder, some questions, he made it very clear that he was getting close to 2 full days a week from each of 2 individuals who knew his industry deeply. And what that told me was that, at least in this case, this isolated case, and I'm careful to not want to generalize too much, but the mentors are really delivering. They're delivering their time, they're delivering their commitment, and it is in turn leading to more rapid development of the business than certainly I would have expected. I really had to tiptoe around to find out a way to say, oh my God, you've given away 10% of your company for 20 grand, which was what I wanted to say. I just started to try to ask it in a delicate way. How do you feel about their investment in the way that's helped your company? And did it seem like it was an appropriate valuation, high, low? I had to work hard at this one. And the answer came back in a way I didn't expect from somebody who was so young and so new to the business. He said to me, I know it's expensive money. I'm not stupid. But given all the things we discussed before that, I'm getting my money's worth. I'm getting real value. And it's only 10% of the company at a very early stage. I know there's going to be lots of dilution. And I was stunned at 2 things. 1, the self-awareness and understanding of how the world worked. And 2, that he really truly understood the trade-off and felt good about it. Because I wasn't really expecting either one of those things to be true. So that was intriguing to me, and it challenged some of my prejudices. That seemed like horribly expensive money, either as an investor or a founder, depending on which hat I'm wearing. But in this case, it appeared that it delivered real value. What do we learn from this? Well, what I think the takeaway from this is, if you find an incubator that really fits rather an accelerator in particular, that really fits your company's needs, if they have domain expertise in your area, if they can reach out to people who are potential customers, potential experts, and they can in turn feed that back to you, that is very, very valuable. And I think it puts a real premium, if you're a founder, on finding an incubator that aligns with what you want to do. People that have had experience, or at least have access to people with experience. And the whole thing was very interesting to me, because I approached this, a little bit with a chip on my shoulder as an angel investor. Gee, this is expensive money. It's a model I'm a little uncomfortable with. And the reality on the ground, what the founder said back to me and could document with very specific examples of each of these, is that it was enormously valuable. So I thought that was important. I think the other key takeaway is that both incubators and accelerators present a tremendous opportunity for investors. And I'll speak a little more to that on the next slide. So I'm going to skip this one. You've heard about incubators versus accelerators, but the next point I think is more important. Particularly as a founder, you've got to be asking yourself, does my accelerator really accelerate my business? Ultimately, that's the question. Because if it does, it's a heck of a deal. If it doesn't, easily could be disastrous for you, and you might want to think about the incubator model as opposed to the accelerator. And it's an interesting trade-off as somebody who's started some companies. I want to talk just a little about the bubble we're seeing down south. At last count, according to SoCal Tech, there are something on the order of 20 to 25 incubators in LA. That feels like too many to me. And I don't know that for a fact, but it starts to feel like the boom of the 90s. And it will be interesting to see whose model prevailed. Because the other lesson of the boom of the 90s is that some of them survived and did very well, and others didn't, much like the dot-coms that were started up at the time, and probably similar ratios to that. Can we go forward one? I don't want people to overlook both the opportunity and the threat to the investor community. We've seen our work with the BTC, the Business Technology Center. There's a huge opportunity to partner and great leverage to be had. And I do believe that the statistics are correct, that young companies in that kind of environment will have a higher probability of success. The part I think people are overlooking at the moment, and I'm a little worried about, is we have all this enthusiasm about incubators starting up at the same time the venture capital industry is contracting. And certainly in LA, the number of firms is falling rather sharply. And those who remain in business may not necessarily have gigantic pools of new money to invest. And so I'm a little concerned as an investor, what happens if the incubators and accelerators all succeed? 10 or 15 companies a quarter out of each of several of incubators show up and they need an A round. They need $5 million to do the next thing. Where is that going to come from? And I think it's both a threat and an opportunity. If you're an operator, if you're somebody who runs a company, one of the things to be thinking about is you may need to do a very large angel round. When we were getting LeisureLink started, we ended up raising $2 million from the combined Tech Coast Angels and the Pasadena Angels. So there is some middle ground to be had there, but you better have your eyes open, because if all of these new companies are hitting the street and all well-trained people that have been mentored, coached, know how to present, know all the rules that Klaus was citing, you're going to have tough competition for that A round. And I have an open-ended anxiety about where that money is going to come from. Now, my deep-seated faith as a capitalist is if there's an opportunity, somehow the money will materialize. But it looks like, proportionately, we're a bit out of whack in terms of supply of companies hitting the market versus investors to some degree exiting. So I think that's going to be exciting and interesting. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for investors, because you're going to have a very large and maybe more importantly very visible pool of companies to look at and potentially invest in. That's really all I had to regale you with today in terms of the investor experience of working with the incubators, accelerators. If anybody has any further questions, I know we're going to do QA, and there's my contact information if you care to follow up. Thanks very much for being so attentive.
Thanks, Steve. So next up, I've got Michael Holliday, and he's the founder of Synergy, which is this building that we're in. And he's also an architect in town who has worked on many of the incubators that have been built previously in Santa Barbara. So I'll pass it over to Mike, and he's going to talk about your workspace matters, and he's going to talk about the workspace.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Synergy. This is a sneak peek. We officially open here in about 2 weeks, but the 3rd of April is going to be our big grand opening party celebration, so you're all invited to come back for a good time. But since I was on the MIT board, our March program fell out about 2.5 months ago, and we said, what do we want to do? And I said, well, I don't know about a program, but if you guys are looking for a cool space, we have one. And little did I know what I was getting myself into, but it's always good to have a deadline. So we're excited that you guys are here, everything's working, and we actually, well, I'll talk a little bit more about this space at the end of my talk, but just want to welcome you and thank you for being here. Your workspace matters. That's what I'm going to talk about, and specifically as it relates to the environment that you spend your time in. This is there's a report called Greening the Building and the Bottom Line. This was by the U.S. Department of Energy, and it's about increasing productivity through energy efficient design. I'm not going to get too much on my green building bandwagon, but we've done a lot of these projects over the years. We've done very large projects out in Goleta and a lot of them here in Santa Barbara. But one of the interesting statistics is the average person spends 10 to 12 years continuously inhabiting a workplace environment. If you think about that, you in your lifetime are, if you had to add it all up, you're for 12 years in some space. And when I heard that statistic, I kind of questioned it until I started looking at it. And they said the average person working 50 years for 50 weeks a year, you get 2 weeks off for vacation, 40 hours a week is 11.4 years. So they're about right. So where you spend your time, it adds up to be a fairly significant portion of your life. And ultimately, many of these working environments, they lack natural light, ventilation, much less inspiring their inhabitants. A lot of what we do as architects is taking these funky warehouse buildings and making them into something cool, whether it's a tilt-up concrete building out in Goleta, or it's an old lemon packing facility in downtown Santa Barbara. There's a lot of opportunity in these old buildings. We try to work with that. This is a great quote I love. "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." And that was Churchill that said that quote. I think it's a great thing for us to remember that you're really shaped by the environment that you're in. And I love hearing Klaus's. We were the architects for the original incubator over there on 402 East Gutierrez with Dennis Kagan back in the day. And that was really an innovative concept for Santa Barbara. And it was really a creative space. There wasn't anything like that space. And I believe that there was a lot of shaping that was done in that building of these companies. So it's great to hear what his comments as someone who's been through a few of those. We also worked with you, Klaus, out in Goleta, and that was the exact opposite environment, a bunch of boxes. You know, and you guys kept saying, how do you make this place cool? Can you do something with it? Because it was a completely different environment that affected their company. They were trying to sort of break out of that grid. There's a lot of confusion, I think, that you've heard. There's telecommuting out there. There's the business incubator. There's, a number of other, there's the cold desk. There's the hot desk. There's the business accelerator. There's the indie working. There's co-working. There's, this is a new one here, Jellies. Jellies is where you get online and you wait for something to gel. So a whole bunch of people get on and they just kind of wait and see, well, he's got something, let's go with that. It's really this online kind of media thing, a lot of it using GoToMeeting, where you can get 16 people online at the same time, really interesting kind of thing. This is another one, bar camps, which is another group that people pull in together. And so these are a whole bunch of words that you're probably hearing if you're out there looking at it. And you've already heard a lot of the definitions. Telecommuting, if you look at Wikipedia, it talks about the terms of working arrangements. And this idea of nomad workers or web commuters. I mean, so much has happened with technology in the last 3 to 5 years. You couldn't even, I'm an architect, so we have large files that go back and forth. The internet has finally gotten robust enough where we can send that information. So this idea of web commuters, you can practically live anywhere and run your business these days. The co-working concept is a lot of what we're doing here at Synergy. We think it fits. We think it's something that we're personally interested in doing, and it's a style of work. It's a social gathering by a group of people who are working independently but who share the same values. We got a lot of toys here. We got our stand-up paddle boards, our e-bikes, our kayaks. We want to have fun in this place. And with the showers and lockers, and we're right next door to Mark Brisby in the training room, who's probably one of the best sports trainers right next door. He's got an awesome facility over there. So we really think this is a great place that if you want to come and have a great place to work, we've got adequate parking. We're 2 blocks from the ocean. This is a really cool, and where are you going to get 30-foot high ceilings and naturally daylit spaces all day long? We had actually workstations all set up here that we had to take down for this event. So this whole thing is reconfigurable and mobile. And it was interesting on the market validation side. I was talking to Jim and Klaus last time. I said, hey, what would you do differently? We did this 15 years ago with the old incubator. What would you do? He goes, don't build all those enclosed offices. That's really where it became a problem. Keep it simple, keep it reconfigurable. So that's why we've got, options here that we're not going to kind of jump into that unless somebody wants it. And the idea of synergy is a big part of the co-working environment. You've already heard about business accelerators, office suites, incubators. These are programs that are designed to deliver services, and that's really what we want to try to do is deliver services to, we've already invented 2 companies here just because the guy's sitting right in front of me, he's an MIT guy. It's so much fun. You come up with an idea, you hear something, and he goes, hey, I can write the code for that. And so, I think that's what we're interested in seeing what comes out of this place is this real heart of an entrepreneurial center, was it really, you're just growing new businesses. These are some of the things that Susan's already covered. I'm not going to go over it, but networking and incubator services that basically help out and management and basically getting you launched. I'm going to talk about this little video is on co-working. If you've got audio, guys might want to cue this up. This says in about 90 seconds about the whole concept of co-working better than I could. So I'm going to go ahead and run this.
This is Paul. He is a freelance writer. This is Sandra. She is a web developer. Paul and Sandra both work out of their respective home offices in Toronto. Lately, they can't seem to get any work done. They have limited resources and have too many distractions working from home. Luckily, they received an email from their local co-working facility and were curious to find out more. They decided to check it out. They went on an info session and took a tour. They learned they could rent a desk by the hour, day, or month, and get access to all the amenities they needed without paying a fortune. Paul decided to get a permanent desk and finally became a published author. Sandra decided to work here part of the time, so she decided to hot desk. And Sandra can still bounce ideas off of coworkers, including Paul. She also presents to clients in the meeting room. Paul likes to take a break from writing every once in a while and challenges other coworkers to ping pong matches. Co-working, a productive workspace and a creative community. It lets you work for yourself, but not by yourself. It's what the world is coming to.
It's what the world is coming to. I thought that was kind of classic. I'm going to give you here a tour. I'm going to wrap up with a tour of the sort of hottest Los Angeles incubators down there. And I think the bubble, as you mentioned, is in a lot of ways is bursting. A lot of people sort of jumped on the bandwagon. Hey, let's open a business incubator. And we're already hearing that, hey, maybe we have a few too many business incubators. So they've built too close to each other. They're right on top of each other. And I talked to a couple of the people, and they said, hey, we should have been a little bit more strategic about where we located and kind of complement one another instead of jumping on top of each other. This is Blank Spaces in Santa Monica, which was actually just changed to CoWorks. Peter and I and Susan went down there. This is a tour. The guys were really nice. They gave us a tour through this. It's literally in a storefront on 3rd Street Promenade. Cool building with natural bricks, a real contemporary kind of office interior there. People ask me, what's our rates here? I'm going to cover a little bit of that when I close up, but there's a number of different environments, and one of the things that they've done in Los Angeles, you basically come in and have a hot desk situation where you just have, you're not working at Starbucks or down at, Pete's Coffee. You've got a place to come and be around other people who are sort of more entrepreneurial, and you've got high-speed internet access and so forth. So that's kind of what they do in the front. And in the back, they really pack them in. I mean, our spaces are generous compared to what they do down there. But you can see that they're very much wide open, some naturally daylit spaces, and then very simple, clean, contemporary architecture. That's what we're trying to do here. It's cost effective. It's not more than you need. Their tagline is "Work for yourself, not by yourself," which I like. So that's the Blank Spaces. I'm going to give you a tour of 3 we went to probably a dozen, but just to give you an overview of what's happening down there. This is in Santa Monica. You literally walk 2 blocks around the corner. This is George Nelson, who is a wonderful modernist designer. And one of the comments that he made about design was that thinking, seeing, and feeling are all related, interrelated actually. He really gets into this. He's creating interior environments, and that's, as an architect, I just think it's so important for you to think about where you work. I mean, is it inspiring you? Is it you around the right kind of people? And this is literally as you walk from Blank Spaces right over to CoLoft, which is the next incubator. It's about 2 blocks away. Literally a storefront, pretty lacking from an architectural perspective. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more, but they have done a good job with some of their social networking and their team building. It's just a big open box, and they are another group that's down there. So you get a sense for the different types of environments. And their tagline is "Work, Network, and Prosper." So interesting. This next one is a new facility. It's in Venice. This actually is it's 4 or 5 blocks away. They felt like they were serving a different target market than Venice. But it's called Working Village, and they've done a pretty nice job architecturally, I thought. Different model, though. They've got a lot of these private offices with glass all the way around them. Some people liked it that I talked to, some people didn't. So one of the things that Susan mentioned was every one of these is completely different. It really depends on sort of your demographics and the target market that you're serving. Their tagline is "Create and Collaborate." So interesting. Everybody's sort of talking about the collaborative aspect of things. Here's Next Space in Los Angeles. This is in the downtown LA area. They've actually taken the second floor of over a commercial retail facility, and pretty cool. They have a lot of interesting spaces, big central open networking areas. I mean, literally, they have guys sitting right next to each other. And I was after hours, and there was still people in there looking around. I don't know if you can see the slide, but there's a combination of conference rooms, which is I think important. I'm really interested in this family idea of building a family of companies that launch and grow, and there's a whole history of entrepreneurship in this community that I feel like we have a legacy to sort of live up to, and it's great to see people like Klaus who have kind of been there and done that, saying, hey, I want to give back. And so it's cool to see the spirit of entrepreneurship is really alive and well, I think, in Santa Barbara. Their tagline is the workplace for the new economy. That's the Next Space, and they're rolling out in all kinds of different places. Now, Santa Barbara Business and Technology Center in Santa Barbara, as I said, we were the architects for this way back when. This was pretty innovative at the time. We took over 26,000 square feet, got it through the city, which is no easy task sometimes, and ended up building that one out. You've seen the systems furniture that were in there. I think a lot of it was some cool office space, and these, which, by the way, we can do these types of offices right here if somebody wants this type of thing. Fun, interesting, open. Unfortunately, we wanted to introduce skylights into that building, but the building owner shut us down just because it sort of is lacking the natural light. But it does have some private offices, and it was ready to work was a tagline that I saw. And that's sort of morphed from really an incubator into more of an executive office suite, sort of in the latter days. Before RightScale hired us, and we were asked to come over and take over that facility and have their company move in. One of the issues with these are acoustics. We've actually all of these are acoustical panels around here. This place was an echo chamber before we put up all these panels here. It really did a major job. And we haven't even built in the panels that are going to go here in the center, or brought in the bamboo and the big palms. And this is ultimately going to be like a working garden because it's unbelievable light all day long. It's pretty incredible. There they had a problem with the acoustics because that bowstring truss shape actually focused the sound in certain areas. It's really this sort of bizarre sort of parametric geometry where one person would be standing in one location, and all of a sudden you could hear him all the way on the other side of the room just because of the shape of that bowstring truss. Fortunately, this is a much better geometry with our roof shapes here, but we had to float these clouds inside the cloud computing company. So if you've been over there, this is the finished product. We just finished this up about 9 months ago, I guess. Put them in there. They did all new systems furniture, and now RightScale is in that space, and Michael Crandell's been great to work with, and it's a cool space if you've been over there. So that's kind of right here in Santa Barbara. Their tagline is powered by RightScale, because they've sort of moved up to the next company. It's been interesting because since I've been in this space, I've been approached by some other high-tech venture guys who've looked at this and go, I want your whole space, Michael. No room for you, but I'll take the whole thing. And I said, that's not really our model. You know, I'm interested in the smaller guys that are entrepreneur that want to get going, because once you get something like up, you could put, 30, 40, 50 people in here, and that's kind of not what we're looking at. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about the Santa Barbara community, and we're excited about this, is the South Coast Business Forum and what's driven this particular facility. Ed Easton is here from the city of Goleta. We've got our mayor here from the city of Santa Barbara. We've got some people here from Carpinteria. I was a chair of the chamber last year, and I realized that we really don't talk to each other very much. And most of us are doing business all over in Carpinteria, in Goleta, in the city, in the county. So this group is the South Coast Business Forum, and we're collectively focused on the South Coast vision for technology. And it's basically the leaders of all these different organizations. But the mission is to create a sustainable economic environment that really promotes the quality of life of the South Coast area, but also addresses entrepreneurship. Synergy was basically born out of that vision, because I realized we've got to do this. It's our opportunity. And I don't know if you've seen the video Techtopia that's out there. The CNBC came up with that term on national news, and they interviewed Brian Donahue, Kevin O'Connor, and Michael Crandell out on the pier, and they said, hey, why start a company in Santa Barbara? And they said, why not? This is like one of the best places in the world to live. You've got an amazing engineering background. It's one of the most beautiful communities environmentally to live in. So Synergy is where we are, and we've located here and our work near the beach, walk to the surf, bike to the park. And my son came up with this one, live the dream. You know, he's got the taglines. He's like, hey, Dad, how about join the team, live the dream? I said, I like that. But we're talking innovative teams working together to achieve exceptional results. That's what this is all about. I've already felt it, just having all the people who've already moved in here and they've already called. It's just been exciting. This is what this place looked like when we moved in. That was my office. I had one of my real estate guys walked in and goes, Mike, you got the biggest office in Santa Barbara. It's 3,000 square feet in my desk, you know. But it's been amazing to sit in this space and feel like this is an amazing place to work. And I felt like I just wanted to share it with everybody. It's incredible. I've actually been working in this building for almost 23 years, believe it or not. Most of it up in the corner there. So this is a great place. We're sort of on the fringe of the funk zone, close to the freeway, close to the beach, walking distance to piers, and it's just a really cool place to be. This is our space and layout. Everybody was asking about all of this. This is morphing daily. Had somebody else just signed today, hey, we want to take over more space. So can you give us more desks? Fine, move it over. Tomorrow you show, moving in. So we've got the opportunity. We're just going to keep this really flexible. The way we've kind of designed it, and this building sort of works that way, is this wave wall. It's an interesting thing. Everybody said, where'd you come up with that? I don't know. I just kind of had this idea in my head of something cool. I didn't know what it was. And so this becomes this little central reception area. We've got parking out front. There's fortunate with this building, we've got a lot of parking around. This is probably going to be more of the co-working, hot desking area, so we're still waiting to see how many people want to take on that. We got central copy machines and so forth. This is going to be more of an art gallery kind of facility because we're going to be having monthly events here where we actually highlight the companies that are here. They get a chance to work together and learn from each other. The back is sort of what we're thinking is the business incubator environment. So we're trying to keep this a little bit more like the guys who are here. You can rent by the month, by the 6 months, or a year if you want, and you save money if you sign a longer term deal. But our goal is to try to do this as cost effectively as possible for everybody because we know how it is. I was trying to locate an office for my own architectural firm, and if you're looking for anything less than a couple thousand square feet, you can spend a lot of money and get a little hole in the wall, and then you're completely isolated from everybody else. This is some little sketches. These are some of the inspirational images. This is kind of our website's going live it's probably already live by now today, but that's what we're working on. Kind of who we are, the location, the space, and we're pretty excited about just what this represents for the entrepreneurial community, MIT Enterprise Forum, and everybody else. So these are the last little shots that we just took. I'm not going to talk too much about that because you've already seen it. I will highlight a few things about the wood here. This building is 1928 vintage building, a lemon packing facility, and so all of the wood is actually recycled or salvaged. From the conference table I cut with my sons. I'd like to give them a real attaboy. Somebody's asking, how much money do you spend on this place? And I said, the minimum possible. But I got a lot of free labor out of my wife and my 3 boys who are working hard to kind of make this happen. So anyway, we just want to welcome you guys and thank the men and women and thank you for being here. And we're just excited at this. We think this is going to be a great thing. And if you know anybody that wants some cool, functional, flexible office space, have them come and see me because we'd love to get you in here. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael. So next up is Sam Teller, and he's the managing director at Launchpad, which is one of the more exciting incubators in Los Angeles. And I believe, he can correct me if I'm wrong, that there may be some affiliation with some of the Santa Barbara venture capitalists and possibly the university as well.
Venture capitalists, yes. University, no. So thank you guys for being here and waiting to listen to me and not leaving. No, this is really exciting, and the fact that this event is happening at all is just such a great testament to the activity that we're seeing in Southern California, what we've been seeing in LA over the past few months. I'm going to tell you about Launchpad LA. Which is the accelerator that I run in LA. It is, as we say, a startup accelerator providing seed funding and mentorship for early stage startups in Los Angeles. So we've kind of been over this a bit. I don't need to go over it again and be the fourth, so we'll skip this. So yeah, Launchpad. This is a sign outside our building. So when you're in Santa Monica, you know how to find us when you're on 2nd Street. How many of you have been to an incubator before and visited one? How many of you have been to an accelerator? Okay. How many of you have visited a startup in an office? Okay, most of you. So, I really encourage, everyone when you're in LA to come by Santa Monica to check out our office. It's a really incredible experience when you see the companies that we have in there all working together. So, just to give you a quick background about me, and then I'll dive in and tell you all the details about Launchpad. For the past 2 years, I've been running a media company in Los Angeles that I co-founded called Charlie. Before that, I was mostly in politics. I ran a big piece of the online advertising for the Obama campaign in 2008. I'll make a quick digression, which I hope you'll find an interesting story. I know you're all reading up there, but if you'll listen to the story for 1 second, it goes back to kind of my tech roots. When I was a freshman at Harvard, I joined the newspaper, and I said, I want to write. I want to be a journalist. And they said, okay, go write about this company that this student is starting. And so I went and I did just that. And you can go back to the Harvard Crimson Archives, actually, and read stories such as Harvard startup expands to Columbia, Yale, and Stanford. More colleges on the way. Harvard startup adds photo feature. Now you can have up to 20 photos of you and your friends. Harvard startup allows high schoolers to join. Now, there's a separate site for those under the age of 13. Now anyone with an email address can join. Facebook's 4 million users are growing like crazy. So it was, for me, that was kind of what really inspired me to get into this tech world. I later interned at Google and kind of learned all about that. But being something like user 12,433, I think, on Facebook, and seeing that growth was something that was so inspiring and kind of unlike anything else that I'd really experienced in my life. So back to Launchpad. The director of Launchpad is Adam Lilling, who started companies, sold companies. He's kind of like our mentor-in-chief. He's on the board of great LA companies. He's terrific. And then, of course, Mark Suster founded Launchpad. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, as a mentorship program. Mark is a VC at GRP, a well-known blogger at both sides of the table, and obviously has started 2 of his own very successful companies and sold them. So just to give you a little overview of Launchpad, for the past 3 years, it has been a mentorship program, as I just said. What does that mean? No funding, no office space, no fund. It was a way for Mark and then a bunch of other local investors and mentors and advisors, including John Greathouse, including Jim Andelman, including Baroda Ventures and Peter Lee and David Bennett, including Idea Lab, including all these people who would later become investors, to mentor startups in LA, to encourage them to start their companies in LA, and encourage them to keep their companies in LA, and show them that, hey, there's a real viable ecosystem of entrepreneurs and mentors here. So both, and it wasn't until last year that we really became an accelerator in the model that we've discussed earlier, and again, I'll go into those numbers soon. So overall Launchpad, including the 10 companies that we currently have, 33 companies total, $86 million in venture financing to these companies total. Over 20 VCs have financed deals through Launchpad, and over $60 million of exits from the 5 companies that have sold that have gone through a Launchpad program, either the mentorship program or this current one. Just a 4% loss ratio. So this is just a look at classes 1 and 2, the ones that went through the mentorship program. A lot of names that you'll recognize, from the LA startup scene. Again, we don't take credit for their success, but we were proud to be working with them very early on. With a company like Movie Clips, which has since raised $7 or $8 million, and Zach James and Rich Rad and the founders were working with Mark Suster and with our mentor crew, very early on, and and you'd see the same thing with any of these companies. So again, just kind of another visualization of the success from those classes 1 and 2 so far. 74% still active, 22% of them, which is 5, I think, have been acquired, and just a couple which are no longer still going. As I said, the mentorship program turned into an accelerator, and an accelerator needed a fund. And we were lucky enough to have, and we are lucky enough to have investors who are really some of the best investors in Los Angeles and Southern California. GRP Partners, the largest fund in LA. Rincon Venture Partners, which you guys all know very well, Jim and John doing the most seed deals in Southern California. Idea Lab, the original incubator, Bill Gross, who's is coming actually over to Launchpad on Monday to spend the afternoon with the companies, and the whole Idea Lab New Ventures team. Baroda Ventures, which is a great local fund, and Dave Tisch and Dave Cohen from Techstars. Dave Tisch runs Techstars New York. David Cohen founded Techstars. This is pretty much, by all standards, along with, probably after Y Combinator, the most successful, the best accelerator in the country. And we're really lucky to have them and them as mentors to me and to our companies, as resources. Why would investors invest in an accelerator? It's true that there are probably better ways to invest your money if you are looking to maximize your profit. That said, it's not a coincidence that the 5 funds in Launchpad are 5 funds from this area. It's first off an investment in the community and in the ecosystem, and it's also deal flow for these funds. They're seeing early stage companies, not just the companies that are in the program, but the 400 companies that applied to Launchpad. But beyond that, there's an economic reason, and you see here the valuations. So this is kind of evaluations of what angel investors would be paying to pre-money valuations of deals in Silicon Valley, LA, and for instance, just using us as an example for an accelerator. In Silicon Valley, the typical pre-money valuation of a startup, 4 to 8 million, sometimes even higher. Deals are expensive up there. A high-quality LA deal, the range probably 2 to 4, sometimes a little higher, inching up. When we invest $50,000 for 6% common stock of the company, or a deal in that ballpark, we're dealing with a pre-money valuation of $850,000 to approximately $1.25 million. So, for small management fees aside, it's actually really exciting, possibly from an economic perspective for the funds to invest in Accelerator. So going to our deal terms specifically, you heard earlier talk about Start Engine. They offer, for instance, $20,000 for 10% preferred. That's that's attracting, as Steve discussed earlier, a different stage of very early company. We offer $50,000 for 6% common stock. We give them free office space for 4 months, as you've heard about, the kind of accelerated, intense program, hands-on mentorship. And, really, it's an incredible network that we've built up, not just from the 23 alumni companies and all the people that have been mentoring and participating over the past couple of years. New mentors are always visiting and kind of getting excited about it and joining up. Investors from all around the country are passing through. It's a lot of the serendipity, which I think is actually the most valuable piece of an accelerator. Just, kind of as a ballpark, we went into this saying we want to have the most entrepreneur-friendly deal in town for accelerators. We did that. We have the most entrepreneur-friendly deal in town. That said, you'll see funding ranges for an accelerator anywhere from probably $18,000, probably up to around $50,000. Y Combinator and Techstars have an extra $100,000 that has been put in through kind of a separate vehicle into each company, but kind of 20 to 50 is probably pretty safe range. And on the equity side, probably 6 on the low end with us, all the way up to 10 or 12% equity, depending on the deal that an accelerator structures. So our application process, what we're looking for, what happened, we, like I mentioned before, 400 applications, 401 to be precise. It was really incredible, the response that we saw in LA. It's hard to, I think we were expecting 100, 150, 200, and it was just an outpouring. And lots from outside of LA as well. We kind of brought that down to about 50 for a screening committee, 25 that we did deeper dives in, and ended up with our 10 companies. And I'll tell you what they are in a second, but just, so you have an idea of what we look for in a company, which I think is fairly similar to what other programs do, but probably not exactly in one respect. First, companies must have product there's got to be something. It doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have millions of users. It has to be something that we can see, that we can click, that we can touch, that we can break, that we can feel. At the stage we're investing in and with the deal we are, I think that's really a requirement. And with the number of companies we had, we're not in the business of trying to turn PowerPoints into businesses or we're not trying to turn ideas into companies. And this, second, we have a strong bias towards teams that have a technical co-founder. It's not required and it's not a deal breaker if you don't. However, in this market, it's obvious. It's obviously extremely difficult to recruit the highest quality tech talent. And for us, an early stage company, a CEO that has recruited a CTO, a technical co-founder, that's actually a great data point for us in evaluating that company and in evaluating that CTO, that they're an effective enough salesperson and they have sold their vision or come up with their vision with someone, with a credible tech person. And that makes us a lot more optimistic about their chances of success. We're not taking clean tech companies. We're not taking healthcare companies. We're not investing in restaurants and brick and mortar businesses, because we do want to make sure that the network we have is able to be of service and to make a big impact on the businesses. So broadly, other than that, we're excited about technology companies in Southern California and in LA overall, and we don't want to say that we just have a focus on media or we just have a focus on ad tech, just because that may be what people traditionally think of LA for. So this is the current class. We've got 10 companies in right now. 8 work full-time out of our office in Santa Monica. 2 of them have their own offices nearby, and the CEOs and other executives the whole team has really come in and out and use our conference rooms, come to events. You might see Lettuce up there, which is actually UC Santa Barbara grads, Rod Mobram and Frank Jones. Their B2B order management system. It's a really awesome, exciting company that we were excited to recruit down from Santa Barbara via Orange County, I guess. And you'll see that it just really spans the range here: ad tech, digital media, white label mobile ordering apps for restaurants, music education software, hiring software, subscription frozen meals, a marketplace for used wedding dresses and other wedding goods, which is expanding into a marketplace for used women's apparel more broadly. Lettuce, as I mentioned, trip trotting, a way to meet like-minded locals who share your interest wherever you visit. And Redacto, and also a great legal software company. Just so far, we've been in business we opened our doors maybe about 6 weeks ago. We have a number of companies which are had raised, some coming in, have raised more since. This is just a sample. Some things can't be disclosed yet. Big Frame's closing around $1 million. Chromatic has raised over $1 million and is going out for a Series A soon. Chow Now is about to close. Trip Trotting announced over $1 million raise a couple weeks ago, led by Google Ventures and some others. So, for us, for better or for worse, the short-term metric for success for us is, can we get companies funded, or can we get them funded with additional capital moving outside of the accelerator? And so far, the answer is yes. We still got the rest of the program and a bunch of companies that are in the process of raising. But for us, again, going back to what I said before, we're not trying to make the ideas into companies. We're trying to take great products and help them figure out how to market them and position them, and help them make the business development connections that can be game changing, and help them make the investor relationships that can take them to the next level. And so to that end, we're bringing in investors from New York and from Silicon Valley and from Boston, from anywhere really, from Santa Barbara, with the hopes of helping them connect with our companies. And I'm in the enviable position of being able to make introductions which are mutually beneficial, show investors great deals, and help entrepreneurs get funded. So why do entrepreneurs join an accelerator? We've kind of gone over this a bit, so I won't harp on it, but I kind of break it down into these 4 areas. Funding should not be the primary reason, but we think that $18,000-$20,000 is not quite enough for what you need to really kind of get it off the ground. That's why we invest $50,000. Network, as I discussed before. The location, we're on 2nd Street in the heart of Santa Monica. This is, we're joking before about, all these things right next to each other. There's a co-working space a block from another co-working space, a block from an incubator. I think it's great. Unfortunately, LA is so big, and I happen to live on the east side and grew up in Hollywood, so the commute sucks. But it's actually having that concentration, I think, is just, it's so important, because we walk out of our office and we run into Mike Jones in the alleyway where he parks his car. We walk down 3rd Street Promenade and we see Evan from Bursley, and Jim's coming out of a meeting, a board meeting, and and it's just again, going what I said before, the serendipity inside the accelerator and in the geographical proximity of the community right there. I think it's really important, and that's something that a startup that's working out of their house, wherever it may be, as you saw in the co-working video, if they come to Launchpad, they're right in the heart of Santa Monica. And then the fourth thing is they have and that's actually from last night. That photo, that's the Trip Trotting team having a product brainstorming session at 10 p.m. in our office. And it's the community, having a place for each other, and also just bouncing things off the other companies, which happens all the time. Chromatic goes to ChowNow to ask their marketing person, and Redacto goes to JobSync and consults their designer, and this is, this kind of stuff is happening constantly. So one thing I just want to speak a little bit more about is mentorship, because it's a word that's tossed around a lot, and it was great to hear Steve talk about the mentorship at Start Engine. And I'm excited to hear reports from companies around town that mentors are getting deeply engaged. It's been probably my biggest challenge running an accelerator, is how to include and all the mentors and the people that we have in our network. And so we've ended up kind of breaking it down into two areas. There are people who, as Steve described, are willing to commit a pretty serious amount of time. That's an hour a week or an hour every other week, whatever it is, to actually be with the companies. And then there are the people who oftentimes are maybe the bigger names, who are really excited to come, but it's hard to get that repeat commitment out of it. But it's still something that's very energizing for the companies to hear, a Brian Lee come and speak, even if he's not going to be there every week. It encourages them, it just kind of generates excitement. The picture on the top there is John Maloney and a few of the other top executives from Tumblr, just valued at a $900 million valuation, one of the big, hottest companies in startups in America, really. And to come and hear that was, you could just see the excitement in our entrepreneurs' eyes to see people who are 2, 3, 4 years ahead in their entrepreneurial journey, even if they weren't really giving a kind of a topical speech about about term sheets or marketing or whatever it is. So it definitely goes, we definitely have these two types of mentorship, and both are very important to the program that entrepreneurs are signing up for. So again, I'm preaching to the choir, but we think that LA is one of the best places to start a company in the country, if not the world. Universities, we're working on encouraging engineering students from universities to pursue entrepreneurship instead of going to work at Google and Facebook and the Pentagon and become professors. It's an issue, and we've gone to Caltech. I've been at UCLA, I've been at USC, and I try and speak to engineering students as much as I can to kind of help show them the other career path, if you will. The media ecosystem, if there's a company that can tie into that, just an example, there are connections which may not be totally intuitive that can really benefit tech startups. Trip Trotting, again, is one of our companies, and they are a social travel site. And you say, okay, how would that plug into, a company, a media company, a studio? Well, we were talking to Dick Clark Productions recently, and we're talking about the American Music Awards, which is an award show they put on. And we're talking about how they try and host international viewing parties. And we say, well, hey, why doesn't Trip Trotting host those? It kind of, the connections and the synergies can really come out of interesting places, and we're really committed to kind of plumbing the depths of LA and Southern California to try and plug our startups in. Lifestyle, weather, you get it. And people say there aren't great exits. Yes, we don't have a Google, we don't have a Facebook, we don't have these companies yet, but we've got great companies here, and we've got great entrepreneurs, and they're mentoring, and they're active, and they are all very invested, and it's an issue of pride for them. They want to see LA succeed, and so we're really excited to have that. So that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. The last thing I just want to say is this idea of an accelerator bubble. Certainly a lot of activity, but it's hard for me to see it as anything but good. There are, if you go up in Silicon Valley, there are many accelerators. In New York, even more accelerators are popping up. And no, not every company is going to succeed, but the fact that people are investing time and money in this ecosystem, and the fact that we are attracting every week, I'm telling you, investors from New York, multiple ones who are coming back and making second trips. People are interested. So no, we don't have the funds in Los Angeles and Southern California to write those Series A checks and to cover it all themselves, but we are attracting a ton of interest. And the last thing I'd want to do is say that we have, too many people trying to help startups in LA. It is going to be an incredible year and 2 years for LA, and we are just so proud to be leading the charge. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So you've listened to us for a long time, and now I have one little thing I want to mention before I turn it over to question and answer, in that I just read that Y Combinator is no longer requiring an idea. You can come in as a good entrepreneurial team without an idea, and they'll bring you in and they'll find you an idea. So they're matching ideas with people.
Hi, thanks. Great introduction to the technology and the concepts there. I guess specifically to this place, I'm a little confused. I'd never seen a combined incubator, accelerator, or co-work. What is this place? I wasn't quite clear. I thought I heard at least two of the three.
Maybe I can answer that question. We've been out and looked at a number of facilities, and the terms, if you read, I think we heard 4 or 5 definitions, that they kind of blur the lines. And when you go, we're sort of thinking about this facility as a co-working facility where people work for themselves, not by themselves. We have a number of investors that are actually interested in funding companies if they're startup people that need those resources. We've also got a board of advisors. Jim is on that, Peter Hartman. We've got a number of sort of leading business industry people that are advising people moving more into the incubator role. So the good news is we got a facility, we're open, and we're flexible. So if you have a business plan that's too much in concrete, what I've learned is that it's going to change. Everything's going to change. So we're sort of opening here in 2 weeks. This is a sneak peek, and we've got, I think, the people, our feet on the ground and up and running, and then we've got this board of advisors, which is actually going to help launch these companies. We were just talking here, he wants to come up and be part of what we're going to do on our monthly events. So we're going to wait and see what works in Santa Barbara, because what works, and one thing we've learned is every one of these incubators is slightly different, even if you're in Goleta or Santa Barbara. So it's a combination is what we're going to try. The co-working environment primarily, and with the business incubator as people need the funding and need the support.
Okay, so I have a couple questions before we'll let you all go.
Susan, I think you had more.
Oh, you've got one, okay. Perfect.
Thanks. I was curious about the practical community aspect of a co-worker, an incubator, or accelerator, in terms of, I would say, conflict resolution. When you have, because you have different companies that are all brought in, and certainly there's a screening process, but ultimately, unlike, you think about all the Dilbert cartoon or something, you have a bunch of people that are all hired, and maybe you put up with the noxious smell coming from your coworker's lunch because you all work for the same company, and if you make a big stink, maybe there isn't much you can do. But in an incubator, you don't want to drive people away, but at the same time, how does that work? Do you have a code of conduct, or how do these things sort of work out?
Well, probably a pretty boring answer, but you just send out an email and tell people not to do what they're doing. No, but there's actually, it's actually an interesting dynamic that we've seen in Launchpad, where there's almost a kind of a competitive aspect, but in a good way, where no one really wants to be the first to head out in the evening. And since everyone's so close, no one really wants to be the ones that are like leaving their lunch out and polluting the whole office. We've had actually shockingly few problems with with good behavior and stuff like that. And really, like I said, it sounded like a joke, but any issue we've had has just been resolved with a quick email notice to everyone.
So one of the big challenges at startup space early on is dealing with payroll and basically compliance, if you will, around that, getting benefits, that kind of thing. And one of the things we did at Koji early on, we had a startup here in town. Actually, it was in another part of this facility, in this per-call building, is we did co-employment with admin staff, and that was immensely helpful for us. So my question is, I've not heard a single word about any incubator or other types of facilities that are providing startup facilities helping in that aspect of that administrative back end, which is probably, it's just a massive time sink and a hassle, and it distracts top staff's time from focusing on their business. So, facility is nice, but what about the back end in terms of that? Has anybody put any thought into that? Do you have any ideas on what you guys might be offering in that sense? Co-employment or ways that you can make it easier for people to hire, provide the paychecks and the benefits and the withholding and getting all that stuff nailed?
Just, in my experience, the incubators and accelerators I've talked to all offer some version of that kind of support. And it ranges from some I've seen that have a very formal program and literally deliver it in a package, so to speak, and others just introduce you to the right providers of those services to get it done. And your point's well taken. I didn't mention it because I thought it was such an obvious hygiene factor that everyone was handling it, but perhaps that's not the case. And you're absolutely right. The HR issues and compliance and documentation, it is a huge time sink and a less fun way to come up with unproductive time than playing badminton inside the facility.
We've got templates for this stuff for anyone that needs them. And I'd say about half of our companies have a lot of this figured out already, or have a pretty good grip on it when they come in. And then those that don't, we've got templates, and then we've got 3 legal sponsors, and DLA Piper, Stubbs Alderton, and Don Lee, and I forget the LKP partners, who kind of do frequent office hours and are there to kind of consult and refer other professionals who offer discounted services.
I'd just like to add, Dr. David Newton from Westmont is actually on our board of advisors, and he just wrote the book that was published about 6 months ago, Business Models for Startup Ventures, and he's actually going to be bringing that to our incubator here to play it out as a test model with Excel spreadsheets, and you just plug and play kind of a thing. Every model's a little bit different, but our concept is to get a complementary group of people here. I'd love nothing more than to say, talk to that guy for web marketing, that guy for business, this guy, so we kind of build this family. But yeah, if you got anything else, it'd be great to have, talk to you about that and offer that to the people that would be here.
Maybe I can add something to that, because as a matter of fact, the sponsor we have here tonight is dealing with that, the HR, the benefits, and all that stuff, to eliminate you from spending too much time on the HR and those kind of things. So I really encourage you to talk to these guys, because they can perhaps be helpful to you.
We heavily focus on white collar, high tech, financial and professional. That's what separates us from our competitors. And we are not a markup of payroll. We are a fully transparent model. Everything's line item, and it'll drill down to the employee level. So we do payroll, workers' comp, group benefits, and also the HR infrastructure. So I thank you for asking that question.
What company?
TriNet. And we are actually a sponsor of Start Engine and Amplify. So.
How do you ensure that you hang on to your IP in this free-for-all of collaboration that goes on in these places?
We pick 10 companies that are so far from being competitive that there really hasn't been any issue with that. I think that Techstars makes no promise that it won't. And this isn't exactly your question, but that it won't from class to class invest in companies that are competitive. But it was definitely a strong consideration of ours to make sure that we were creating a safe, a community in which everyone would feel safe being very open and leaving their computers and leaving their papers on the table and stuff like that. So.
Okay, I think we've run over, and I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to let you go, but I'm sure the panelists will stay here if you want to come up and ask questions as well. Thank you all very much, and
Thanks for
look
coming.
forward to next month.